Good evening. Appreciate all of you being with us. It's nice to have a good crowd and have attendance here to see what's going on in the school district. So we appreciate all of you being here. At the beginning of our meetings, we start with a moment of silence, and we'd invite you to join us, please, for a moment of silence. Thank you. We have a young man that's going to come up and lead the pledge for us. So if you want to introduce him. And
I'm not the young man. This is the young man, Holden Durham. This is Holden Durham. He's one of our 5th grade students at Tomasi Salem Elementary School. Holden is one of the hardest working and most positive students that we have in our school. In addition to being a straight A student, Holden is also one of our Cougar helpers at school. So he opens up car doors every morning to get our day started. Outside of school, Holden participates in jet wrestling. He is a very accomplished wrestler. And he has won many awards over the years and really does an outstanding job with that. Last year, Holden was the recipient of our most prestigious award at Tomasi Salem, the Myra Dillard Leadership Award. This is an award that we started 3 years ago to recognize the rising 5th grade student who demonstrates the most extraordinary leadership skills and work habits. And that's Mr. Holden Durham. So just a great young man, and he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Got Joel to join us. Holden, we'll follow you.
Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Holden.
Thank you, Holden. All right, now if I can have Mr. Orr come on up here. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Bobby Norzan. I'm the principal at Tomasi Salem Elementary School. And tonight I got to say a little bit about one of our special students, and I'm going to get to speak a little bit about this special man right here. This is Mr. Robert Orr. This is my 4th year at Tomasi Salem, and I got to know Mr. Orr a lot my first summer there because he and the other 2 custodians were the ones who were kind of working with me the whole time. And what I realized quickly about Robert was, number one, that he's an incredibly hard worker. And more importantly, he's an incredibly kind person who just loves people. And that's just who Robert is. He just loves people. He always works with a smile. He's a little nervous up here, so he's not going to be smiling. But Robert is always smiling. And any time that I need to talk to him, I just stop him and we just talk. Now, the only time you won't get him to talk is after school when he's running his buffer, and it's extremely loud. But then you'll still get a thumbs up and a smile from Robert just every time you see him. There have been many times over the years that I would just need to talk to Robert just so he can get me laughing during a school day. And every time it worked just the same as it did the last time. We would talk for a little bit. We'd start laughing about something. We'd always talk about retiring, and meaning that we would retire at the same time. And the day that he told me officially that he was retiring, he was talking. He said, well, I think I'm going to do it this year. And he's said that before, so I was like, really? And he just looked at me as serious as he could be, and he said, so what are you going to do next year? And I said, Robert, I don't have any options. Nobody wants me anywhere else. So we went back and forth, but that was something that he had decided he was going to do. But again, one of the great things, there's so many great things about Robert. When somebody tells me something, a lot of times I've got to write it down so I don't forget to follow up. With Robert over the years, what I've learned is if I talk to him about something, I better be ready to move on it. We had a situation a couple years ago where I was thinking about moving a projector screen into the conference room because it was something that I thought we needed and it would help out with meetings. So I was talking to Robert about some possibilities about doing that sometime in the near future. And 15 minutes later, he calls on the radio and he wants me to come check and make sure he hung it at the right height. That's just what Robert is. Everything that he does at the best visibility, and he does it to make other people happy. And that's just how he's been ever since I met him. He's been at Tomasi Salem for 12 years, and those have been 12 very special years for everybody who's been at Tomasi Salem Elementary School. Being a custodian is a difficult job, and that's just when you're performing your routine tasks. But throw in an anthill on the playground, a child getting sick in the classroom, having to have the cafeteria cleaned and cleared out in an hour's less time than usual with very short notice, putting a basketball goal together from the box, a teacher wanting her bulletin board moved across the room, a toilet that's overflowing and won't stop, a teacher wanting her bulletin board moved back to where she originally had it, and on top of that, you still have to get your daily routine done. But that's a week in the life of a custodian, and there's no one, or no one has, or no one will ever do a better job than Mr. Robert Orr. Robert Orr will be retiring this year, and our school will miss him tremendously. He has worked every day with a smile and has shared a kind word with everyone who has crossed his path. Simply put, Robert made TSC a better place. We hope you enjoy your retirement, Robert. We appreciate everything that you've done. To kind of show you a little bit about our school, I put a video together just to kind of show you some of the fun things that happen while our kids are learning, and just to kind of show you Robert in action too. And there's a couple pictures of him on there. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Northern?
Well, just thank you for letting me share about our school, and again, Mr. Orr, he's a special person to a lot of people.
Thank you, Mr. Northern. Mr. Orr, congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda then is, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the agenda for the work session of April 9th, 2018.
Second. Motion and a second. Anybody see anything needs addressing? Hearing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Next, we have public comment. We have some people, I think you have to sign up. Reminder, if it's 5 minutes per person limit and 10 minutes if you're speaking for a group, but you would have to be the only person speaking for that group. You can't be a 10-minute presenter and then somebody else come and speak on the same topic right behind you from the same group.
We have Pastor Lee on behalf of Oconee County Citizens for Bullying.
Mr. Lee, you can come on up.
I want to thank you for allowing me this time. I'm Leroy Lee, and representing Oconee County on bullying. It comes to my attention, or our attentions, when bullying becomes very serious in the lives of people, from very small, can influence, impact a youth. And so it grabbed my heart and many others' heart to see whether we can help in identifying bullying, helping the process. And when we look at the documents that's out there to be able to drive that process, we see some areas that we think would improve this. And we want to be a partner with school board, and we see that the community involves the teachers, the parents, the students. And have a strong community, you need to have all pulling together, and communication is key. Whether it's verbal or written, it's very key. And so when we begin to look at what we have in place, policies and procedures, and we see maybe some changes need to be made in regard to this book. And we used the Seneca High School as a model to look at for how you address bullying. And so we have come up with some proposed changes, and just to, if you would like me to pass the copy out to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You read me too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you. No copies. That's okay. We can share.
I have a scene outline in your printed text there, and the concerned citizens propose to use the bullying report, incident report. We looked at over the internet and looked at the different schools and how they handle bullying, and the reports, how it's reported, and if the language in the procedure is is not strong, then the report form need to be strong to be able to drive the process. And we looked at the report. If you look at the reporting sheet in third page, that's the bullying incident report. That's the copy we receive off the internet. It looks like it's a good, solid report because it drives the process from the beginning. And if you look to turn on the back of that bullying report, it do a bullying incident follow-up. That close it and put in one package. And to me, to our citizen, concerned citizen, look like this would be an enhancement. We just edited. Go back to the first page. We just edited the Seneca School document below, and we just suggested the language. And you can see the highlighted part of the proposed language is the changes that we made to the Seneca School document. So, for example, the original language and then the proposed language. And so I don't want to necessarily go through all of this, but you can see it's written, I think, very clearly. You can see. And so this will only is a model from Seneca High School document and the language that we recommended in the proposed language to be changed. And the changes will marry with the bullying incident report. And I think if you look at it and consider this as a possible change, then I think we'd be going further to have an enhanced process. So that's what we would like to see happen in the bullying process. We also would like to be involved in the juvenile arbitration. You're getting involved in that. We want to get involved with the mentoring point. I think we talked with the superintendent about becoming involved with the mentor program. And so talk is very cheap, but we need to be in action because the youth, as they are now, they're needing help. And so in order to have help, you need to step forward and say that you want to help them by getting involved. So that's my...
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Next, we have Nancy King.
Hey, Nancy.
Hey there. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I know someone who teaches in Oconee County. They work with a population who requires a teacher with incredible passion. You pay my friend a wage that's very close to poverty level. A teacher in Oconee County can make more money at QT. How many of you live on $35,000 or less a year? You don't have the money to provide the classrooms with current technology. You can't provide the money for field trips or even provide these teachers with the basics to teach. But now you're entertaining the idea of arming and training principals and key staff? You have no other ideas? I have a concealed gun permit. I have approximately 3 hours of training where the teacher of the class gave us all the answers to the test. I shot a stationary target, and I scored better than any man in the class. I was better than the hunters and those who are threatened by people in their own neighborhoods. What training are you going to give those teachers? I know, I was told today it wasn't teachers, they'd be principals. Well, principals are teachers too, right? Otherwise, business people would be principals. Teachers have had to endure changes all year by the school board. But now this? A teacher can now witness her principal shoot a student? Really? Are you pandering to your base? It is my opinion that this decision will be a political damaging action, not only to you on the school board, but to the sheriff's department as well. Please explain to me and others here your plan on how you are going to replace all the teachers who are immediately going to give their resignations with this knee-jerk decision. It'll be an interesting dilemma that you will soon bear witness to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Next.
Hello. As a retired educator here in Oconee County of 38 years, born and reared here, went through the schools of segregation, then through, which was a two-room school that closed, and I went to East End in Seneca, then to Blue Ridge. Then I graduated, went off to college. But when I went off to college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that. I came back and I got a job at the school that I graduated from, Blue Ridge High School. My concern, Mr. Nabinet and other school board members, is I challenge you to look at the diversity in Oconee County. I challenge you to challenge the principals, the school directors, and district department heads to diversify their leadership team that are representative of the population of their students. 50 years after integration next year, I'm going to ask you, how many African American are in administrative positions here in Oconee County? I mean, principal, assistant principal, that's administrative degree positions. In the district office, 50 years after integration, I went on the website today and I saw one person of color on the website, according to the website now, and that person will be leaving in the end of the school year. Now, why is this important? It is important that you receive from individuals from different culture that view things differently, that share values and thoughts that are important to their culture, to be role models to students in that school that look like them, to encourage the team to think out of the box, challenge them to get away from a good old boy system of doing things. Let me bring it home to you. Most of you have children, some of you have grandchildren, and maybe some might have great-grandchildren. What if they were the minority in the school where they attended, with no administration that looked like them? Administrators, teachers was few, custodian was few that looked like them. You expressed your concern to the school board, to the administration, but was told, grow your own. Or we cannot find any. But they really haven't looked in all the places. In order to change, or for change to happen, it has to be a priority from the top down. I noticed on the website there are 3 administrative positions open, along with approximately 30 teaching positions. How many principals will look for teachers of color to hire? If not this year, what about next year? It has to be a priority. It has to be a priority from the board to hire certified, classified bus drivers of diverse ethnicity, so children have role models that they can look up to. I am concerned. Others are concerned. Are you concerned? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have anyone else? That's it. Well, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is division reports, and Dr. Thorson, I'll turn it over to you
Okay.
for presentation.
Sure. I'm happy to have Sheriff Crenshaw here with me tonight, and Kevin Davis, his chief deputy, is here with him. And we have met internally as a district administration, and he's been meeting with some leaders in his leadership team at the sheriff's office. And we've been discussing school safety since, of course, the tragedy in Florida several weeks ago, and things that we can do to make Oconee County as safe as possible, our schools here. And I feel very positive about our schools. I think facilities play a role in school safety, and I think facility-wise, our schools are among the safest around. We have lobbies in almost every school that, you know, visitors have to buzz into the school, check into the front office. No school is perfect, but I feel like we're in very good shape facility-wise. But there are other parts to that. School resource officers play a role, and I think that's one thing in the discussion of school safety since that tragedy in Florida. I think one thing that most people agree on is that there needs to be a school resource officer in every school, and that's certainly part of our plan here. That's what we want to see happen in Oconee County. But there are other things that are a part of it as well. So we wanted to share tonight a proposal that would be on the table for your discussion and potential to vote to implement. This is something that we've put a lot of thought into, and I know Sheriff and the law enforcement officials have put a lot of thought into. So we wanted to share some things tonight. Okay, it's not. Let me make sure we pull it up here. You'll give me just a second. I'm going to have to log back in. Just a second. So we'll call this ASAP, which is Armed School Alliance Program, and it would be a partnership between the Sheriff's Office and the school district. And Sheriff and I are going to kind of go through a couple of these slides. I'm going to start with the first one, so if Ms. Moore, if you'll go on. So the ASAP program, what it is, and we've got a few bullets that we'll discuss between the two of us. So the first one says it would allow certain employees of the school district of Oconee County to be armed on school district campuses in an effort to deter violence and confront if necessary. And I want to make a point that the most important part of this program, in my opinion, is the deterrence. We don't want school violence. We feel like this can help deter school violence. So I want to place an emphasis on that word. This is not a replacement for school resource officers. The goal is still for us to have a school resource officer in every building. We currently, just for the audience here, we currently have 9 school resource officers. That's 1 at each of our 3 high schools, 1 at each of our 3 middle schools, and we have 3 officers covering 10 elementary schools. So that means at the elementary level, we have 2 officers covering 3 schools and 1 officer covering 4 schools. Our goal would be to have 1 at every school. This is similar to programs already used in other states. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke with Talina Wright, who is a superintendent in Argyle, Texas. She's the superintendent of Argyle Independent School District. They have a very similar program to this that was implemented shortly after the Sandy Hook shooting. That was in December of 2012, so their program's been in place for 4 or 5 years, and she reports that it's been very positive. And in just a minute, I'll show you a sign that they have in Argyle that is on every campus that they have. One other thing I want to emphasize, this would be completely voluntary from staff members. No employee would be compelled to participate in this program. Someone says, no, that's not for me, fine. We don't expect everyone to want to participate in this. So I think Sheriff's going to handle a couple of things now.
Well, before we get into the slides, I would like to add that, after every shooting, law enforcement kind of looks to see what we can learn. What can we do differently? How can we better protect our students? How can we help the victims? How can we save lives, in our schools when it comes to school shootings? We know that it takes on an average in Oconee County 8 to 9 minutes for an emergency 911 call for law enforcement to arrive on scene. So, what can we do to improve the safety and save lives during those 8 to 9 minutes? So that's how this conversation got started, trying to think of what else we can do. And Dr. Thorsland is correct. We don't have a program like this, to my knowledge, in South Carolina. I don't even know in the Southeast, but there is programs around the country. So we got to looking at that. But some of the concerns, and I'll share them with you as we go through this, to be eligible, selected employees must undergo a mental health evaluation. That's the same requirement that is now standard in South Carolina for police officers. Last year, our state passed a law that you have to have a psychological evaluation done before you can become a police officer. So we would want that as well for even though they're school district employees, we would want that mental health evaluation. We'd said to complete 40 to 60 hours of initial training from the sheriff's office. It's just as important that you understand what this program is, but also what it's not. This is not a weekend firearms safety class. This is not a concealed weapons permit 8-hour class. We're actually looking at, once we've factored up the concealed weapons training as well, that would be a part of this, but it would be probably more on the 60 hours of initial training from certified instructors at the sheriff's office that actually do the same training that teach our citizens when we hire them to become police officers, to become deputy sheriffs. They would have to prove their shooting ability by qualifying twice per year, twice annually, which is the same requirement as a sheriff's deputy, as well as participate in an additional 8 hours of annual rapid deployment training, which addresses training in our schools as far as school shootings. So an initial 60 hours, and then annually probably 16 hours of annual training, qualifying 2 times per year with that weapon. I made a note here. If we go forward, these employees will get essentially the same training that a deputy sheriff gets over the first year of their employment at the sheriff's office. We would be providing this. Next, no elementary school would be left alone by a participant, not necessarily arming teachers. My thoughts all along as Sheriff of Oconee County, has not been a fan of arming teachers, but in our discussions with Dr. Thorsland School District, discussions with our staff as well, we said, well, what if we were to look at someone not necessarily assigned to students? Whether that's an assistant principal, whether it's a guidance counselor, whoever, but not necessarily assigned to students. So that's kind of what we began looking at. So, that's what it is, but it's also not an arming teachers program per se. Safety considerations would be in place to prevent friendly fire. That's another big concern that I've always had with this type of program. When we get there, how are we going to know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is? And, but we've got, obviously, it's actually a multi-step process that our staff have come up with that would be known only to school personnel and law enforcement. That when we arrived on scene, I can assure you, we would know who that school personnel is actually before we get there. And trying to, but you know, we want to protect that process to keep anyone from trying to duplicate that or circumvent that. And so that would be something that we have taken into consideration. I have as well. Next slide. You know, as many as 50 participants across school district Oconee County facilities. You know, what we had talked about was initially, you know, for the school board to consider. You know, we don't have to rush into this thing. It doesn't have to be done by next week or anything like that. This is a new program. You know, we don't have a model to go by, so we're writing the book here. But one idea that we've considered is to maybe come up with a pilot class where we would actually invite the superintendent or someone from his office, possibly one of the school board members if you wanted to participate, and up to maybe 8 other school district employees that would go through this training and then provide you with a feedback that if you needed that to make a final decision before fully implementing this program. The next slide, only Sheriff's Department issued weapons would be allowed. Obviously, you know, we track those by serial number, so they would be purchased, assigned to that particular employee. If that employee left the district or was reassigned, possibly that weapon would be reissued. You know, the life cycle of a weapon, you know, I don't know that we found one yet that we've had this is completely worn out. We have Glock armorers on staff at the Sheriff's Office, certified Glock armorers that can replace parts as they do become worn. And I guess this might be more toward Dr. Thorsland, but obviously for the cost of one full-time employee, you know, we can potentially train up to 50 across the district for what it would cost for one SRO. And this doesn't replace, I'm certainly in agreement with him, this doesn't replace that school resource officer. That's our first priority, is to have them there, not only for safety and security, but for mentoring as well. You know, our elementary program has been very successful, and so we need to continue pushing forward with that. But as sheriff, you know, I cringe on days when that school resource officer is out sick. You know, when that school resource officer has to go to mandated training, when that school resource officer has to go to court for court appearances. You know, sometimes our principals send our resource officers out to check on a student that, you know, hadn't been at school for several days to see what kind of issues might be going on there. So those are times that I feel like a program like this could enhance what we're doing with school resource officers when it comes to safety and security.
And this is the sign from Argyle, Texas, that's on every campus in their school district. And again, back to my opening comments, this would be a deterrent. If you read much about school shootings that have happened in the past, some of the findings show that the school shooters did think about how much force they would be faced with where they were going. And that went into the decision-making process of where they went to commit acts of violence. This program, for me, is much more about preventing an act of violence from ever happening than it is about reacting to an act of violence. We could have, the next slide is a sign that we could put up in our school district if this was something that you know, just kind of a tweak of that same message, but something we could possibly put on all of our school premises. And I do want to just mention to you, we've talked to our principals about this briefly, and there were 2 principals in particular that just said, if that ever happened in their building, they're going to respond to the person who's committing that act of violence. And the principal said, you know what, that's my job to protect the students in my school, so I'm going to respond. It will be a whole lot better for me to be able to respond with force than to go respond kind of helpless, really. If you've got an unarmed person versus an armed person, there's, a pretty high likelihood that the armed person's going to win. And Mr. Norzam, who it just happened that he was here tonight. This was not planned. That Tomasi Salem Elementary was the school that was presenting their highlights tonight. But he was one who said, as far as his school is kind of off the beaten path, response time could be a little bit slow in his building. And he would relish the thought of there being another person that could respond if the SRO didn't happen to be in his building that day. I don't know if you want to share anything.
And I don't mind sharing it. We've had, Ms. Hughes and I have had conversations Ms. Hughes does an incredible job of working extremely hard to keep our schools safe. And when you're keeping many schools safe with the different playgrounds, the different entrances, all that kind of stuff, it is difficult to have a uniform policy for everything. In our situation, we are a little bit further away than most schools are, and we had a discussion after we did one of our practice cut red drills, and she asked, okay, if there was an intruder in school, how would you communicate with the school district at 911? I said, I'll just be honest with you, I would tackle them. That's the first thing that you would think, and you think about your child. And we went to Charleston over spring break, and we're walking down the road, and I always, like all parents do, I'm on this side because I'm by the road, and my child's on this side. I see a stranger who was acting a little bit out of control, so I switched him over, and he was on this side because I was going to be in between him and my child. And I think you naturally react that way, and I think everyone naturally reacts that way to protect, and you want to protect and you want to stop it as quickly as possible. I am extremely appreciative that we have an SRO who is able to spend some time at our school, but when he's at another school or when he's not there, we have nothing. And the only thing that stops someone like that is a person. It's not time, it's nothing else, it's a person. So as much as that's not my goal to be the person who has to stop all this kind of stuff, I certainly want to protect our kids and protect our teachers. And I feel like if that gives us a better opportunity, then absolutely, I'm all for it, because I think, just based on instinct, and I think many of us in here would react the exact same way, you are going to go after that person to try to stop it. So you would be much better served if you had a way to react to it instead of just using your hands when they've got a gun. So that is how I do agree that is something that I think could be a deterrent. And again, just going along those lines more, if you go by a house and you see a sign that says no trespassing dog or whatever, well, that might make you think also. I think the more things that make people think that's not a good idea, the less chance that's going to happen. So, if that is going to deter a bad guy from coming into our school, then I'm all for it.
Thank you. And if I could just add one more comment, and then, of course, Sheriff, if you have any other comments, but I don't want anyone to think this would be a free-for-all. Any employee who wanted to could go get a CWP and then start bringing their weapon to a school campus. That is not what we're promoting here. If you notice the number earlier, we said as many as 50. We've got 19 different facilities that house students, 16 kind of traditional schools, and then we've got our career center, our alternative school, and our adult ed facility. So if you just do the math there, 19 divided into 50, we're not talking about a huge number of employees in each building. We're talking about a very small number of employees in each facility. So this would be a highly regulated employees who were volunteered to participate would then be screened. There'd be a screening process that, again, we don't want to go through all the questions and determining factors, simply because part of that is keeping it secretive so that people can't figure out ways around it and that kind of thing. And then once they were selected, they would have to go through all of the processes that the Sheriff's Office has in place, the mental health screening, the training, then they'd have to prove proficiency with a weapon before they would even be allowed to participate in this program. So we're not talking about anybody can bring a gun to school. We're talking about a very specific, small number of employees per facility with a very regulated program with continual training.
Yes, sir, and if I could add, you know, I don't know, if we pick 50, I hope somebody can graduate from the program, because it's not going to be easy. You know, it's not a rubber stamp class that someone can go through. You know, if I'm going to assume this liability, trust me, these folks are going to be trained. They're going to be able to address that issue if an active shooter does come into a school. But some of the topics that I share with you, of course, we've talked about whether you have your current concealed weapons permit or not. We would make everyone go through that class initially. That's kind of day one to get that squared away. But then we would actually go into use of force training, an initial firearms class, target acquisition, fundamentals of shooting, advanced shooting, shooting on the move, must pass proficiency test, qualify 2 times a year, defensive tactics. You know, they'll also be trained in weapon retention, where someone can't just take that weapon away from them. Rapid deployment training, that's something that we do with all of the deputies once a year in training how to respond the best way to a school shooting. They will participate with our officers as well. We're also going to give them what we call TAC Med training, basic first aid, you know, where they'll be able to know how to apply a pressure bandage to an open wound, effectively apply a tourniquet kit to a child that may be shot, that if they don't get that bleeding stopped, they're going to die. Well, this is in a few minutes. Situational based training, evaluation. So it will be, you know, it's going to be a tough class. And but that's why I say, if you want to get some feedback, you know, as a participant, if one member of the board would feel like they wanted to go through anyone, we'd be glad to do that pilot class, and then give you some additional guidelines to kind of judge this program on.
And Sheriff, to clarify too for people that this is not somebody going to walk around with a gun in their hand during the day or on their hip. No, somebody could take it, or it's going to be laying out on a desk or in a desk drawer.
Again, you know, we don't want to advertise where, but it will be concealed. Right. You know, and if it is carried on them in a secure holster that can't fall out and accidentally discharge. You know, all those factors have been taken into account.
It's just unfortunate society's gotten where we have to address those, but even when we had the Townsville shooting, you know, things came up again, and we hired 2 more resource officers, and then it's just kind of quiet till something else happens, and then you have a major shooting somewhere else, and you know, I appreciate the preventive part of this, and we're hoping to add maybe 2 more in this year's budget, resource officers, and getting closer to having 1 in every school.
Yes, sir.
Whatever we can afford. But we appreciate that. I'd like to see, you know, I'm sure we would have some more questions about details of certainly cost and things are effective, but and then seeing how many people are interested in that, you know, in schools, and who, and it would be a very strict selection process to have that. So we appreciate your support for this and safety of our schools. Appreciate what you do for us. So.
Well, you know, it was with some reservations initially, I admit, you know, and we always get the question, is the answer to, is it more guns in our schools? Yeah. You know, so that's, but, you know, an effective program such as this, those few minutes that it's going to take us to get there, you know, if that gun comes in that office or that room, obviously it gives a school employee an opportunity to save lives. And that's the whole intent of this.
Mr. Rucat.
I appreciate your presentation. I'm trying to remember the last time we spoke months ago, you kind of gave us a price tag on what the first year of an SRO would cost. squad car. What would the, just for the audience information?
First year cost for a school resource officer is about $94,000.
We figure 95 when
Yeah.
we do our estimate.
Okay, so we're looking right now in Oconee, then we're going to need 10 of those. So that's,
Not 10 more.
well, I'm talking 10 times the $94,000.
That includes salary.
Salaries and all that.
Fringe
yeah.
benefits, health insurance. You have to buy a vehicle that first year, that's $30,000. And then, of course, all the equipment.
With what we're discussing, are all the, like the Walhalla City, Seneca, Westminster, are they aware of this? Because if memory serves me correctly, when Townville situation occurred, the 911 call came across on the Oconee side as well.
That's correct.
And your men and women were responding as quickly as the Anderson folks were. So my thought is, if that horrible situation occurs here, the city departments will come as well. Are they going to be aware of how integrated is this knowledge of what we're sharing going to be?
Yes, sir. They would be brought on board. If we did go forward, they would be brought on board as well with the identification process, so that every law enforcement officer in Oconee County that was responding to a school shooting would be aware of how to identify the person at the school that was armed.
Just came up with this. When we do extensive active shooter, no, sorry, wrong word. I should use code red. Thank you. It's good to have a smart lady beside me. Code red. Are these city police agencies also involved in? Is it just the sheriff's department?
We have done them at times where they are involved. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sheriff, just for the implementation period of this, you know, with the extensive training, the mental health evaluation, what kind of implementation period are you reasonably looking at that this could be accomplished?
Well, you know, we would be somewhat limited in that we would probably train 10 at a time. And we're limited to 10 because we have 10 firing lines at our firing range. So we would not take on more than 10 per class. So you're looking week and a half of training. So it potentially, if to get us to 50, if that was our goal and 50 were selected, you're probably looking 2 to 2.5 months to get all of those folks through that process.
But we could start with less.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we could.
Absolutely. You don't, you know, if y'all voted to go forward with the program, you know, once the first 10 were trained, then you know, the signs go up and those, you know, 10 are at the designated schools, wherever they may be.
Sheriff, I think this is a good idea. I think we need to proceed cautiously, and I think the idea of having a group, say from the board and the administration, to go through the process to begin with, and see what questions we would have and what things we needed to iron out. I think that would be a good way to go, and personally, I would like to see us proceed.
Anybody else have a question, comment? Okay. Well, thank you, Sheriff. Nobody else has a question. We appreciate you being with us. Thank you. Okay. Anything else, Dr. Thorson? All right, Mr. Hamby, we'll move on to operational services.
Sure. We have the financial report for you, which we'll start with that as we get started with operations. And it's any questions you might have, I'm sure Ms. Moore can happily answer for you. Not a whole lot out of the normal.
Same as always, we're pretty much on
target.
Timeline, on par for this time of the year.
We are.
Good. Anybody have any questions?
I had
Anything
one
that's
question
all?
about a check, and it was, I think it was for cameras on school buses.
Yes.
Are those?
Those are some new buses that we got.
Okay.
And we had to put the cameras on those.
Okay.
They don't come equipped with that, and we try, like, when they take an older bus away, we try to salvage the cameras that we have on them, if at all possible. Sometimes those aren't working and that, so the state does not provide cameras on the buses for us. We have to pay for those ourselves.
Okay, great.
When we get one. So
Thank you.
we're expecting some more new buses in the next wave. Mr. Wright goes down to a meeting in Columbia on Wednesday. He emailed me today. He won't be at the principal meeting, but he'll go down there Wednesday, and he expects to hear some about that GPS routing that we've talked about, and when we're going to get some more buses in our county. So. But the cameras are expensive.
Yeah, they are. It's good to
That was
have.
not even 10. That was maybe 7 or 8 cameras.
Any others on the?
Okay. Anybody else have a question? Anything you saw have a question about this month?
Okay, the second thing on our topic, and Ms. Hughes is here in case there are questions, as she's been one of the driving forces behind this, but as we've said before, our SROs do an outstanding job, and they don't just do the safety and security at schools. They're always thinking about ways to improve things that we're doing. And you know, our students are required to take a live at 25 before they can get a parking permit for our high schools and or our career center. And that program, number one, it's a for-profit group that does it. So the price has gone up to $40 for our students. It's not always available, you know, close. Sometimes I know of one situation where a family had to go to Spartanburg to get it, so they had to have it in time to get a permit. So Officer Roach and Officer Logan from West Oak High and Seneca High, respectively, talked with Ms. Hughes and began working on a program, and it's called Drive Smart. And so basically what we wanted to do was implement our own safety driving program for our students. We would do it with our SROs. We would do it in county. It would replace the Live at 25 program. They brought Dr. Thorson and myself over to West Oak High School. We were in a conference room. They showed us the program. They showed us the outline for the program. They showed us the videos that they would use in the program. And the great thing about this in our minds is not only does it give it to our kids and locally, it would be $25 for us, so it would be more affordable. And what we would do with the money is we would pay the SRO that teaches the class, or the SROs that teach the class, and then we would take the other part of that money and put it in a maintenance fund to restripe parking lots and work on the roads and the parking areas, and so sort of have that to help offset that, so the money would stay in Oconee County and help our students. But we could also have a specific section of each class tailored to the traffic pattern at Walhalla High School or Seneca High School or West Oak High School, because it's different at all three schools. I watch a lot of kids. I helped a couple of mornings when Walhalla was shorthanded. I watched a lot of kids who were coming in at the last minute. You know, you're supposed to go all the way around by the stadium and come through and loop through. I watched several kids make that turn and take a shortcut there. And of course, Mr. Gary and them went and got them. At Seneca High, you come in, and if you want to park in the student parking lot, now you enter in the first entrance to that parking lot. If you go all the way around, that's where the parents are going to go, and you're going to have to go in front of the auditorium. At West Oak, we've got the red light there now, and we've got parents picking up in the front, and we've got kids and buses leaving out the back. So they can incorporate a part of our own school driving patterns into the class. So we wanted to bring that to you all. On their SRO site, there is a tab for Drive Smart. It's got information about it. We would do all the registration online. It would go through school pay it would help the data clerks, because when they fill out the registration, they're putting in their driver's license number, all that, so it'd make registration easier for cars and permits through the setup that Beverly worked on in finance. So we just think that it would be an improvement over what we're doing now, and it would help our kids more for us to do the program than to continue to use Alive at 25. And since that was a requirement from the group, we wanted to get your blessings on that. So we'll be happy to answer any questions. Ms. Hughes can help me with that, or...
This would be a certified program, same as the Alive at 25? I mean, with the...
Well, I mean, when you say certified by...
Well,
because Alive...
Don't they get a certificate when they finish these?
They do. Yeah, they get a saying they passed so that they can get their parking permit.
Yeah, that's right.
But like theirs is not certified like the National Transportation Board or anything, so it would serve the same purpose, yes. And they would get a certificate when they finish, and that's how they would use that to get their driving.
Does it affect the family's insurance cost? I mean, sometimes when you do driver's ed training, you get a reduction, maybe as much as 10%.
They don't get one for Alive at 25.
There are some insurance companies that will consider that, but student drivers have to take a course anyway to get their driver's license. So this would just be in addition. And it focuses on the same things that Alive at 25. Distracted driving, not texting and driving, all those types of things that seem to cause teenagers to have accidents.
This would be a Saturday course, I assume?
Could be, yes, mainly on Saturdays, yes. It's about a 4-hour course. But we'd have the luxury of doing them as needed. We could start in the spring to get those kids ready who are now getting their license and that, do them over the summer. And we could have, if we needed, to just have one in central locations, career center after school. So.
We also tailor it for our kids. Right now, the first Saturday of every month, they teach an Alive at 25 course at Hamilton Career Center. Pickens County, Anderson County, Greenville County. Any kid that wants to can come and signs up, and that takes our students' spots. So that's why Mr. Hamby said we have kids who have to go to Spartanburg to take a class when they can't get in a class right here at Oconee County.
What we would like is for if you check it out, and again we can show you some of the clips if you'd want to see them. But for you to give us your blessing for us to allow it, because we want to inform the Alive at 25 people. I want Ms. Hughes to get to call them and tell them that we'll know if they're using their program. We've got one. And again, our folks have made sure that there are no copyright issues, there are no problems with anything. It's not copying Alive at 25's program, it's creating a program that is similar, but it's their own program. And they did a very nice job with it.
This is a one-time expectation, so if a 10th grade student takes this course to be eligible to park on one of our high school campuses, they do not retake it as a junior or senior. It's a one-time.
The box is checked and they're good.
Right. Well, anything we can do to help teenagers be safer drivers on all of us is, right, I think, a great idea.
Okay. All right.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay. And now we want to share a little bit of budget information, and I know we're kind of preaching to the choir, but we are sort of working with, the House version of the budget at this point. There's some differences between the House version and the Senate version. We'll talk specifically about those things, but there's some major differences between those two. But what Ms. Moore did, and it's a tremendous amount of work to go in and do it and change it once we get the new numbers. But what she has done, because it was the information we got the quickest, was it's based on the House, which has a 2% increase in salary, has a minimum increase to 32, but we're above that already, so that does not affect us. It has a 7.1 increase in the cost to the district for the portion of health coverage, no increase to the employee. And we also remember have that 1% that's ongoing for 4 more years after this year for retirement to help fund the
Are they
retirement.
putting any money in behind any of those? Because I had heard at first that 2%, they didn't provide any money.
Well,
They want us to do it, but they
They
don't
did
want to pay
provide
for it.
some, but they left the base student cost the same. They didn't change it at all in the House version. So it's kind of that shell game they played, and they didn't, increase the base student cost. But they did say that they were given a portion. When Ms. Moore and I were at the meeting, I leaned over and asked her, I'm like, okay, it says 1% is coming from 34 million from this pot, and 1% is coming from 27 million from this pot. I'm like, which one's the 1% amount? Which one? Because you'd think the numbers would match up a little bit. We couldn't get answers from the State Department at that time. So, as we typically do, we're gonna start with this budget, and we'll work around what we get from the folks in Columbia. We have to go, and you have the timeline there. We go next Tuesday across the street to talk with County Council and do our initial presentation to their Finance Committee, which is the whole council, but that's next Tuesday, so we had to get going with this. We'll tweak it as we go. It does include, you'll see 2 additional resource officers. But if you'll look on the second page that you have, general fund expenditures budget proposal, and line 1, salaries, and you'll see an increase of $1,333,026. That is including adding 9.5 teaching positions that we need to add. We talked about the 3 full-time all-day PIP classes. We also have an increased need in our special ed population for 4.5 positions across the district. And then we had a net increase on our FTEs that we give out based on enrollment. We kind of counteracted that. We took academic assistants away, 1 position each from the high schools that was just extra that they had. So we counteracted that and got it down to 1.5. So 9.5 new positions is what is currently included in that. It also includes the 2% increase in salary with the step increase. And the reason it did not go up more is because last year we had to, in this current budget, we had to figure in more for the payouts because of all the folks on Terry and that. And Ms. Moore also had to, she adjusted our sub pay down about $95,000 and some temp positions out to sort of make it balance out. That number would be higher, okay, because we're going up 2% and we're adding 9.5 positions. So I didn't want you to think that that number was out of skew there.
But those 9.5 positions, I want to reiterate, all classroom positions.
Yes. Well, that's certified staff. There's 3 classified staff that go with the PIP class because they have to have an assistant in there. So there's 12.5 that will all be working directly with children.
So it's a $2.8 million increase total is where you stand right now.
Yes, and that includes the 7.1% for employer health insurance. So when I did the calculation for that, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, a full family coverage for an employee is almost $12,000 a year. The district pays $12,000 in addition to what the employee pays. So when you and a lot of our employees do get full coverage because they have young families and they need to do that. So that's a part of it. You'll also see the $200,000 increase in departmental budgets is in our current year budget, even though we're paying the contract for mental health counselors, that was not included in the budget. So I added in the $75,000 for those 3 contracts. And in this budget, the state is moving a line, technology line, into another funding stream, so it will be broken out. But we wanted to include that for Josh to have to spend in the coming up year. So I increased his budget by the same amount that we got this year in the technology fund. And then the other things, the increase to security is 2 new SROs at $95,000. And then some estimated cost if we do go forward with the program that Sheriff Crenshaw talked about. And we took out the $500,000 for the fund balance, so that kind of offsets those increases, except for the salary and fringe.
That security part also, we're also looking at mental health, the screening for, you know, a specific grade level, middle school grade level for our students to get in kids with emotional issues early, if at all possible. That's included in that part.
It's key.
And there is, in the Senate Finance Committee version, the raise for teachers is 1%. So we would have to decide, you all would have to decide if we want to do the 2%, if that were to come to pass, or if we would adopt the 1%. So
The Senate version also increases the health insurance part for the employer 8.2% instead of
7.
So.
But did they not increase the student
They do.
allocations on in their budget?
They do slightly.
And the governor's though had, like, he increased it in his proposal, didn't he?
No.
I thought I read that the
I haven't
other
seen
day.
much on his other than that he was gonna veto any potential raise.
Was
What I
it?
heard today.
Oh, I didn't hear it today. Well, they don't listen to him anyway.
Whatever, right.
Right now, there are 4 different there are 4 different income or revenue amounts floating around out there, and the one that I've used is the worst case.
The lowest, okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Anybody? Yeah?
Yes. Numbers
He's
out.
calculating.
I couldn't find my calculator on my iPad, so I used my thumb, so there's a big error. So basically, if we take our salary plus our fringe, total that up and divide it by 99,000, that's 89% of our money is,
Yeah.
That's true.
is salary. Just wanted everybody to know that. So you got 11%, you got 11% you can play with.
That you can deal with. Yep.
Just want to make,
Well, and even that, some of that's restricted with utility bills and things like that, so.
so 89% roughly. Throw that
And
out.
that's why that, we're talking about, I think one of the ladies did a presentation, 35,000,
It's always been 86.
but the average cost to us for a teacher is what? The average salary is 49 or something, isn't it?
I calculated it whenever I was adding in those positions at 52,
At
just for the
52.
salary. And
But
then-
that's without fringe.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
So when we pay insurance and retirement and all that, what would it go up to?
For those 9 positions that we added, it was,
Right at 60.
right at $200,000 for those teachers, for the fringe,
For the fringe?
for the fringe, yeah. And almost 500 for the
So
salary.
there's a lot more cost. When we talk about hiring a teacher, it's not just adding 35,000 or 40,000 to
and-
the budget.
And just to correct that comment from public comment, there, of course, we pay teachers based on the state scale, and that goes to your degree, bachelor's, a plus 18, a master's, plus 30, and doctorate, and your years of experience. There are 2 teachers on that scale who make right at 35 or a little bit less, and that would be a bachelor's degree with 0 or 1 year experience. Every other teacher on our scale makes in excess of 35. I'm not saying teachers are well, I'm not trying to argue that. I'm just saying the number that was thrown out earlier was probably not accurate.
what is the average? And I know there's a big fluctuation in how you figure it there, but just an average
around
salary.
50.
It's around 52
Okay.
for the southeastern
I
average.
missed that.
Like on HR side, what is our certified people, what is their average degree? Masters?
Masters, yeah.
About how many years?
I actually have that in my report.
Sorry.
We're gonna do that.
I guess,
Coming up.
I'll wait.
Yeah.
Hold up, Joe. Hold up, Joe.
While she's looking for that for her part, are there any other questions about the budget part for us? Again, we'll bring forth, updates as we get them, but that's where we are.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have anything else? Okay.
Do you want me to respond
Yeah,
now?
go ahead.
Last year, we hired, well, the most teachers, their educational degree was bachelor's. There were 50 of them. Master's was 18, and master's plus 30, 22.
But that's new hires.
New hires.
If you took the average of the whole district, it would probably be.
Yeah, it would be
more people with
more
masters.
because eventually they have to get their
And we're talking like
renewal,
17
and so they
years,
end up
things
getting
like
the
that.
masters to get their renewal after their first year.
Okay. Ms. Hopkins.
Good evening. Exhibit 2 is our annual request for approval of locally board-approved courses. And I did not get one of the courses on here, so I can tell you that there will be an addition next time. But you can see that we are asking the board to renew High School 101 and 102, Peer Mediation 1 and 2, Service Learning 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Equine Science 2, which we started last year. We'd like to add peer tutoring this year and literacy. The literacy course is really for those students that are really not ready for English 1 yet and still need a little bit of support before they tackle that and have to hit that end of course exam. And the other course that we'll be asking you to approve next week is team sports. And so we'll be bringing that forward. What would happen with those 3 new courses is that teachers would develop them out in Canvas over the summer. Mrs. Simmons would review them in the fall before students begin class and make sure that
If they
they're good to
weren't
go.
ready for English 1 at the beginning of 9th grade, and they do a literacy course, would they be ready second semester for English 1?
Well, they'd certainly be
as a
more ready, and that would be the goal. That would be
Okay.
the hope.
But-
And we
So
do
they could
see,
complete it by the end of
Yeah.
their freshman year.
and that's the nice thing with the block schedule that we've got going now. And we do have more students actually that have had a chance to retake or make some changes in their schedule second semester. So we've seen some benefit to students for that schedule change. Any questions on the locally board approved courses?
How's the equine science going? Is that just west
Actually,
of?
well, there's a
Just
therapy
west- just
component.
west of.
Yeah, there's a therapy component in that, and it's a nice bit. Second agenda item for instruction tonight is a policy for homeless students. And I do want to call out, even though we want to focus on the changes in the policy, I want to make sure that the board and folks in the audience understand that there's actually 2 terms that are important to understand when we're talking about homeless students. So the homeless student is the student who does not have stability in their lives. The next term, though, underneath that, if you look at that unaccompanied student, is the student who is living somewhere without their parent or guardian. And you may have an unaccompanied homeless student, and we're actually seeing more and more of that happening with some of our immigrant students. So do know that that's a circumstance that we're dealing with. But this policy is trying to just keep us current with the changes at the state level in dealing with homeless and unaccompanied students. One of the things we do need to consider is where they should attend school. And so in the field school down Gloria, one of the additions that we're recommending is that we do give priority to the request of the parent or guardian or the unaccompanied student themselves if they don't have that parent or guardian here, looking at what's going to work best for them in meeting their educational goals.
But if they request, they're living in Seneca and they request to go to Walhalla, what about transportation?
Well, that's one of the
the
things that we are
policy
required to provide.
Well,
and
right
so-
now we're providing transportation to students to a school in Anderson Ford.
And so we reserve some Title I money for homeless and delinquent students. And
Like I said, they wouldn't have the
covered
money
that out of
to
that.
provide their own
We're
transportation.
responsible for it. If the group, they have a group that looks at their situation, if that group believes that it's in their best interest to stay in the school they were in, and that, then we have to figure out how to provide the transportation. If it's in county, we can usually make it work with the buses, but this is a very unique situation, and we have 3 students that we now make sure we get to schools in Anderson Forward.
The sentiment is that you don't want to disrupt the student's educational experience any more than necessary. However, there are times when the parents themselves or the guardians may want the child in a different setting, and so we do need to understand that there are various life circumstances that may have caused them to become homeless. And if they're in a difficult, abusive situation, then maybe they do need to be moved. In other cases, the stability of being in that ongoing educational program is important. So that whole point is about really trusting that the parent and guardian are making the best choice, or again, that unaccompanied student. And then that next bullet that's added really is speaking to those different factors that we might have to consider in making that determination for the student. It goes down then to say when the student does have permanent housing, when they're no longer homeless, they may still be unaccompanied, but when they're no longer homeless, they have a permanent housing situation. We don't necessarily want to disrupt their education at that point, so we may keep them in that setting until the end of the year. The next section is on academic and extracurricular activities. So again, trying to make sure that we are not harming the student, so as appropriate, the district ensures that they'll have access to their activities as well as the regular school program. And then you can see below the numerous bullets that relate to the written explanation that we need to keep documented, and this is just again keeping us current with the legislation. All of these things are required documentation, and we go through that process. It does speak to coursework, and this is not inconsistent with what we're trying to do with students anyway, whether or not they come in partway through the year or not. But the idea here is that you want to give students credit for everything that they have accomplished, whether or not they've actually completed an entire course or part of the course. But if you think about what we're doing with proficiency-based now, partial course credits kinds of things, it's very consistent with what we're doing. So dealing with students at each individual learning standard, looking at whether or not they've mastered that, tracking that is important. This is where it's really great that we have our Canvas system to be able to document what students do know, what they have learned. We see that going back and forth also with the alternative school program, where we're trying to work with students that are struggling. And so the practice is in place. It's getting the policy to actually support the practice that we already have going. And you can see then the final comments here about having other opportunities for other learning experiences. So the whole gist of this is just making sure that students are supported, that we recognize that they have difficult circumstances, and that we are doing everything that's reasonable and appropriate to help them be successful and to continue to participate in extracurricular activities. Mr. Rucat, you have a question.
I think at some point you had mentioned this, I think months ago, the unaccompanied students.
Yes, sir.
Is there someone at our school that's going to help work with this child to give him some direction? And who would that?
So it may vary. At the elementary schools, as you well know, that's usually our guidance counselors that would be especially tuned into those students.
Is that what they're designed?
It may be, in many cases, also a limited English teacher that's a little bit more familiar with what's going on. A number of the students that we have in that situation right now are coming from the Honduras, to be honest, and so we might be looking at our LEP teachers. At the high school level, we also have our graduation coaches, our transition coaches, and in all of our schools we have our at-risk staff that are also available. And then as well, there's typically an administrative person, typically an assistant principal, that is tasked with monitoring those students. Under Read to Succeed, we are also required to make sure that we are monitoring students and frequently checking for progress to make sure that they are making academic progress.
Anybody else have a question? Okay.
And then the third piece that we have this evening is our strategic plan renewal. You all recall a very thick document. So this is not that document this year, although there's still a lot of pages to it. But this is where we speak to any changes that we want to make. We have to look at our data and what progress are we making. So the first section of this document is a recap of the data. And then we need to address whether or not we are going to make any changes in our strategy. All of the schools, I want to remind you, are going through this school renewal process as well. We don't bring their documents forward, but they're available if you'd like to see them. The one change to this process this year is that the state has incorporated the gifted and talented application into the strategic planning application process now. So if you recall when we actually did the strategic plan a few years ago, we had the strategic plan and then they incorporated the Read to Succeed component and the technology plan. So they put all three of those pieces together. I would like to tell you that they did a good job, but all they did is really kind of just put them in the same package. They didn't really consolidate the work. The same amount of work is there. So now they've added the gifted component to the package, and it's the same thing. They've just kind of bolted it on. They haven't incorporated it. So you'll see at the end, the gifted and talented goals are in here. You'll see some notes on, this is all map data and that we had to incorporate, but if you get down toward the end, you'll be able to see that. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. If not, though, I'll happily answer any questions before next week, and I'm sure Mr. Rucat has.
100 and something pages of
You want to kind of get down to the end, because the beginning is mostly the data, and there will be, there's an executive summary of the data.
On your page 4, you have I guess the second, third, fourth, and fifth. You had arrows going up and down, and I was assuming those were gains and losses.
Yes, for those grade levels, whether or not they...
I was wondering, okay, then I tried to figure out, okay.
And you're seeing some of the highlights that we do and that sort of thing in there. But that's part of the analysis that we're looking at. In general, if you're looking at the data academically, we are trending in the right direction, and so the strategies are to stay the course and to continue on what we're doing. The writing program is making a difference. We've been working hard on, you've heard us talk about the TDA process and continuing to do that. We are seeing some increases in the math performance, and we're working hard on the math curriculum right now, so we'll continue to stay the course with that. There are concerns in the climate area. If you look at the executive summary of the needs assessment, and some of those concerns actually were addressed with some of the other topics this evening. Bullying is a concern. We have trained a counselor that went to a State Department training on a bullying program, so that, again, staying the course with helping bring that back and help our schools with that. Giving parent voice and making sure that we're hearing from parents at SIC meetings, and parent involvement opportunities were some of the other things that were of concern there. But again, those are things that we've had strategies for that we'll continue to work toward. And then one of the initiatives that Dr. Thorsland has really championed, and that's the foreign language in the elementary school, so continuing to promote that and work that, and our principals remain committed to that. So really, it's a matter of staying the course.
Anybody else have a
I got
question?
one more.
One more, all right.
Okay, referring to the MAP test.
Yes, sir.
Does it only compares our students within our district? It never has, since MAP is pretty much the United States, have they ever just normed that?
It actually is the largest nationally normed test that is out there. They have the largest growth database, and so it's normed.
Okay, so it's normed, so have we ever compared ourselves to that norm?
We frequently do.
I was trying to find, I was hoping I could find that on.
There are so many different reports. I did not include that actual data in here, but I'd be happy to provide that to you. And they have also done a South Carolina norming study, so we can compare it to South Carolina. I'll take that as an action item.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry.
You could.
Yeah, Mr. Hanvey is reminding me that we had moved the Parent Advisory Committee meeting from from March to April, and so this has not been vetted by the Parent Advisory Committee yet. That will happen in a week and a half, I think.
And those reports you were talking about, if you want to email those to us, that'll be fine, too.
We'll be happy to do that. Any other questions or
Ms.
comments?
Hopkins? You have anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
All right, Ms. Williams.
Okay, my report, before I can pull that up, this is the contract status report, and this is where we are this time of the year. It's time for contracts to go out. In the past, you know, we had that April 15th deadline that contracts needed to go out, and that has since been changed. We just have to notify staff of their contract status prior to May 1st, and then they're back by May 11th. So that's going to happen. You will see that you'll get the names next week as far as rehiring staff based on those that are returning with the continuing contract or annual teachers. Just so you have a little bit of background, what you have is live data as of right now. So anything after today, if someone chooses to resign or not return, then that's not in here. So this is, if we were to issue contracts today, this is how many we would be giving out.
Does this include the ones Ms. Hopkins was saying that we would be adding,
No, it
the
does
PIT
not
program?
include
And
any new
so it'll
hires. This
go
is-
up and-
Yeah, these are people that are currently working that we know will be returning. So that's what this is. Now, one of the things that we do look at is anyone in December, we sent out the letters of intent. And so if they have said that they plan to not return, we already have that in. So those folks are not included as well. And you would have already voted on their names that they're not returning. Keep in mind also, because Terry is ending in June of 2018, so we did have a big number that will be exiting through the Terry program. We had about 30 of those total in December. We had, well, actually half of those went out in December because that's the magic time to get out prior to the cap salary. And we have close to about 21 people that will be subject to the cap salary, which means if they're rehired, they can only make $10,000. And they did go back into session last week and voted 10-9 to not consider the bill with adding certified teachers due to the fact that there are other state employees that said that they should be considered as well, like the police force, if you're working at Clemson University or anyone that's a state agency as opposed to a private agency. So they will not vote on removing that cap until next session, so that will be in the fall. So now, with that being said, they have given us an option of how, if there is a critical need position, how we can hire those folks back, but it would have to be done after May, after we consider the fact that no other candidates are eligible that are non-retirees. So we do have that option if that is an issue with having to fill a critical need position. So looking at, just so you can kind of see what we, if you add this all up, it's a total of 828 contracts. This is about 50 less than what we did last year at this time. And again, we're taking out all the Terry, there are more Terry folks and retirees that are already coming out from this. So that would explain that number. If you look at the breakdown for elementary, it's about 448 contracts. Last year we were 453, so that number is pretty close. Middle is 171 contracts. Last year that was 181, so about 10. High school's 169 as of right now. Last year it was 198 at this time, so it's about 29. And when I did look at the Terry data, there is a lot of high school and middle school folks that are in that number. And then additional locations such as HCC, Oconee Academy Adult Ed, it's the exact number. We did 40 last year, the same number, because those FTEs are fairly consistent. And then with adult ed, they hire a lot of at-will staff due to the fact that those are more part-time positions and they pay so much per hour. Just looking ahead at positions that we have to fill, we have a variety. Almost everything's out there, middle level, high school, math, science, ELA, of course special ed. It's been a critical need throughout the school year. And then we have several elementary and early childhood vacancies. So there are several vacancies that have been posted in addition to administrative vacancies due to the domino effect with some of the positions that we're filling now. Looking ahead, we interviewed student teachers. We're taking a look at those that are working in our district, looking at diversity at some of the schools where we have several folks that are student teaching now, going to the local job fairs and reaching out to the HBCUs. We always try to reach out to Claflin and Orangeburg, South Carolina State. We also held, there was a scout program that was done at TL Hanna back in February, which was an alternative certification outreach program where anyone that had a 4-year degree, if they were looking to be certified, they can come and talk with us about how can they be considered for teaching. And we've actually talked with several folks just in the recent weeks that are definitely interested in seeking alternative certification, and especially minorities looking at those as well. So that's kind of where we are. Like I said, next week you will get the list of all the names, and we'll send that to you prior to the board meeting so that you'll have time to read it. So it'll go out in the Wednesday or Thursday packet, so you'll have all the names to reconsider for rehiring the teacher staff for the 18-19 school year. So.
Any questions for Ms. Williams? Thank you, ma'am. Next is, I need a motion to go into executive session for employment recommendations and changes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation that we go to an executive session for personnel items, employment recommendations and changes.
Right.
Motion is second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank y'all again for being with us. So we'll go back into regular session, and we had 2 items. One was student discipline appeal. Do I have a recommendation regarding the student appeal?
Mr. Chairman, make a recommendation to uphold the hearing officer's decision.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? So that decision is upheld from the school district's hearing officer. All right, do I have a recommendation for the administration's recommendation for employment?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the recommendation of the administration on the personnel changes in employment.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? That is also unanimous. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
I'll second that.
And it's unanimous. Okay. Thank you.